welcome back to another video again. Today, this is an LSVTEC swapped Integra, GSR head, B18, B1 bottom end. This one we did the work on. It's we built the bottom end in it. We installed the engine and we installed the clutch and all that stuff. With this one here, we had it come back for a little bit of smoking, and I think I've kind of diagnosed it as being an injector failure, because the injectors on these are the standard truck style Hunter tune injectors. I do not think they're ethanol compatible. Originally, when we had installed these injectors for him years back, I think this was like a few years ago, he was on pump gas, pump 91. Now that we rebuilt the engine, we got all that done. Put the engine back in, he took it home, we swapped it over to ethanol, so E85, and a couple weeks go by, and maybe a week or so goes by, and he's like, hey man, this thing's smoking a little bit, when it gets warm, yada yada yada. So here we are today. I did a compression test. Compression's slightly low for this setup. It should be 180 across the board. It's 150 on cylinder 4. So what I'm going to do today is pop the head off, inspect the cylinders, maybe even pop a couple pistons out of it, and kind of see if we don't have a hurt piston or something like that. I do know that I plopped the injectors out of these things, threw them in our tester, and we tested them, and they didn't flow very well. Again, I think a big part of that was because these are not rated for ethanol, and we went ahead and ran ethanol in them anyway. So that probably the injectors themselves did not like that at all, and it probably resulted in a little bit of engine damage. First things first, we're going to go ahead and get the coolant drained out of this system, considering we do have to drain. We want the coolant out of the water jackets when we pull the head off, so coolant doesn't get into the oil ports and the cylinders and all that stuff. Plus, we have to remove the upper radiator hose that goes to the head. Mandatory, you're pulling your head off in any way, shape, or form. You're going to want to drain your coolant completely. That's going to be our first task right now. We're going to drain the radiator. We're going to pop the plug off the front of this B18 block and get the water jacket drained as much as possible as well. Right there, it's on the front left-hand side of the block. That is your water jacket plug. Pop that out, let it drain into our bucket, and that will be the rest of the coolant system. It's very important to hold the plug in there, because if you just pull the plug out, it's going to go spraying everywhere. Slowly let out a nice stream of coolant. That way it's nice and controlled and doesn't go everywhere and make a big mess. Now we got all of the coolant out of the vehicle for the most part. So the head, the cylinder walls, the water jacket, the radiator, the hoses for the most part. We're going to go ahead and start pulling the exhaust and the manifolds. So typically you would disconnect the feed line, the return line on the bottom of the turbo, the charge piping that comes from the cool side of the turbo to your intercooler, and completely remove the exhaust pipe and then remove the turbo and manifold off the head completely. But for time's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and try to cut some corners here, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to pop this manifold off and just sit it farther enough back into the core support to where it allows the head to come off from there. So it looks like we are gonna have to undo the charge piping to the turbo, but other than that, we should be able to leave everything else intact with the exhaust loose and scoot this thing completely back and out of the way. So again, the purpose is to get this done quickly, to get it done efficiently. So we are leaving the manifolds in the car. However, I am going to remove the injectors anyway, because like I said before, these are the standard truck injectors. They're not rated for ethanol, I don't think. So we're going to go ahead and take those out. We have some brand new Hunter tuned 1000cc injectors straight off of huntertune.com. We're going to go ahead and put his new ethanol friendly 1000cc injectors in there. We're just going to unbolt the manifold, and like the same thing we did with the exhaust manifold, just kind of set it back against the firewall, because with this setup we should have enough room to do so. I can always go in an in-depth video on how to remove specifically intake manifold or specifically exhaust manifold. If there are things that you want to see more of how to do or anything like that, you want to get my input on it for whatever reason, just go ahead and comment on it. Let me know. I can always make separate videos for any of this stuff. If you like to see videos like that, just let me know. Give me a comment. I could definitely make more content about how to do things in more in depth, and whatever it is. So plenty of cars around here. I can definitely go in depth on whatever. The only thing that's truly slightly challenging about taking off an intake manifold on a B series is getting at the bolts and the nuts that are underneath each runner. So what I like to do, with the fuel rail off, the injectors out, and the fuel return line disconnected, it makes life so much easier. What I like to do is just use a little 3" 3/8 extension with a standard deep well socket and a ratchet. Really easy, really simple to just get up in there underneath from the driver's side. It's very important that you go in through the driver's side and not the passenger side of the manifold, because otherwise you're going to be making things a little more difficult, because there's not a whole lot of room to get in with all the hoses, the harnesses, and the trans bracket. Getting in through here, you have a lot of versatility. You can get through all the way to this farthest runner. So that's how I like to do it. That's how I like to break those free. And then once there's broken free, as long as the studs are clean, the bolts are clean, you can just take the ratchet off, stick your hand on there, and get it in there, and then, one-handed unscrew it. So pretty simple, pretty easy. That's the method that works well for me. Now that we have the intake exhaust manifolds disconnected and out of the way, the ignition setup is gone, the harness and the hoses are disconnected on the passenger side, what we're going to do is disconnect the ground strap for the valve cover. We're going to pull the valve cover, and then we're going to go ahead and loosen and remove the belt from the camshafts, and then we can start working on removing the camshafts themselves. Now, the cam hardware is a tricky subject because a lot of people, they'll just over tighten these things and stretch the threads, snap them off, typically stretch the threads. And more so than not on these 10 millimeters on the end caps of the plates and the caps. So typically what you do is you break all these loose with a ratchet first. And then you can use like an impact or something like that, like my trusty Milwaukee, and just take the bolts out faster. However, since I built this, I know everything's torqued to the spec that Honda wants them to be torqued to, so I feel extremely comfortable just using the impact right off the bat and popping off all the bolts. Another thing to take note on is every cam cap has got a number and a letter. Like this is, well, this one doesn't have a letter. I thought they had letters. Anyway, this one's 2 with an arrow. The arrow on a Honda engine, whenever you see an arrow, it's always pointing towards the crank pulley. These end caps, you can see it, exhaust 1. So this is exhaust 1. This is cam cap 2. 2 goes there. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. What you want to do is make sure you take this dowel pin and this O-ring out of this little journal here. So as you can see, it's a little O-ring and a dowel pin. They are separable. You can take them apart. And it's very easy to lose this out of the head. Don't lose that. I always put this in a small baggie, like a jewelry baggie, and then I set it with all the other bolts in a bin. And I also like to do something a little different from what I've seen other people do. A lot of people will leave the head studs inside, if you're using head studs, inside the block when they pull the head off. Now I used to do it like that, and it honestly drove me nuts because I'm always fighting the head studs on my way up. So what I do now is I like to actually undo the head studs while the head's on and pull the studs out before I pull the head off. These particular ARP head studs 8640s are a 3/16 Allen key on the head. We might have had a little blow through. As you can see right here, it looks like the gasket got a little scorched. So we're probably going to need a new head gasket because it should look something like this. You can see right there some exhaust gases were getting through. That's probably what was filling up the cylinders. It might not have been oil, it was probably coolant. But we're still going to examine the cylinder walls and the pistons and see if there's any other carnage. Some people might disagree with me, but I like a clean workspace when it comes to oils and fluids, so I always make sure before I pull the head off that I have a tray or some sorts that I can set the head on to allow all the oil and the coolant to further drain out of the head before I throw it back on. Let the oil drain out, let the coolant drain out. That way you have a clean install, you know, you're happy, it's happy, everything's good. So far you can see, I mean, we still have really good cross hatching there. Really good fresh cut cross hatching. The piston over here looks like it got a little dry. That looks like water. It looks, I mean, obviously you got coolant sitting in the exhaust ports right here, or pockets, but it looks like it was just pushing water into the cylinder and it was screwing up the combustion. So I think we're okay. I mean, we're gonna go ahead and rotate this thing over and check the cylinder wall out on this side and make sure everything's good to go. So I mean, we're looking fine, you know what I mean? I say that's good. We got coolant. That's definitely coolant. You can see it's got very low just viscosity, and it's just kind of wanting to travel down the cylinder pretty good. If that was oil, it'd want to stay. So I think we're good. I think the bottom end's still 100% ready to go. It was just right here. Unfortunately, it did melt away a little bit at the head. So we might be screwed on the head side, because that is 100% a little screwed up right there. I don't know if you can see that. You see how it kind of scorched through right there? That's kind of a problem. Gasket's toasted, but that was probably the issue all along. We just blew through the gasket and scorched the head. So might be able to either get a new head or weld up on that and then have it resurfaced. Pretty much wraps up that. You know, that was the biggest thing, is we were trying to figure out why the cylinder was filling up with fluid, and come to find out it's water, not oil. Because when I stuck a bore scope in there, it looked like oil. But when I did a compression test, the numbers weren't high. And typically, if oil's in the cylinder, the compression test is high. So that's what made me skeptical in the first place. But I was preparing for the worst, thinking it was going to be, you know, a cracked piston or something, and that is not the case. I don't think. I'm fairly confident that it was just that head gasket scorched through, and the head itself got a little scorched. So we're going to plan for a repair on that, see what's up. We'll go ahead and talk to Reed about that and see what he wants to do. But as of right now, I think we kind of determined the issue. Even the slightest nick in that fire ring on the head could cause issues. And since this head was never machined properly, it was kind of just supplied to me, and it was just drop in and go. A lot of things could have happened with that. That coupled with, you know, the injector thing and all that other stuff. A lot of things could have happened. I'm not going to speculate too much on it, or at least we can make the repair and get him on his way. So that's pretty much it for that. Until next time, I might do another video on like an install, the reinstall on this. So stay tuned for that. But until then, you have a good week.